yes, you can learn animation for free at home, online, or by your damn self. It just takes some dedication and determination. But then again, anything to do with doing animation takes dedication and determination, even if you were doing an accredited paid-for course. So if you don't have that dedication and determination, then good luck, because you're gonna need it. I'm gonna show you guys how to structure your learning and what you actually need to learn in the order you need to learn it in, so that you can have a well-rounded education in animation and become a professional level animator by yourself. This video isn't to teach you about these things, but to give you a structured guideline on what sort of curriculum you should follow in your learning so that you can become a professional level animator for free at home. I did go to college for animation, so I'm drawing on my own experience of the curriculum that we followed there, as well as the areas that I feel like maybe the curriculum lacked. Now that I've got over 11 years of experience in this industry in various sectors, I know what people need to know to become good professional animators. I'm in a senior position, I hire other animators, and if you follow these guidelines with dedication and practice, you will become a good animator. I'll provide a summary of this video on my Patreon, so you can go ahead and download that document so you can have something to refer back to with the links that I mentioned here in this video for all the resources that you'll need. And then you can go and do further in-depth research for yourself on the things that I speak about here. First things first, there are certain skills or exercises that you need to do and learn to provide a good foundation for your animation skills. Now, I know you're probably chomping at the bit to start with the animation stuff. That's what you're here for, right? But I do strongly suggest strengthening your skills in these areas first, because they're going to improve your observational and your animation skills in the long run. I recommend practicing your gesture drawing, which will help you understand better how bodies work, what realistic poses and body mechanics look like, and concepts like weight, balance, line of action, perspective, and 3D volume. If you're not able to attend live gesture drawing classes, a really great website you can use is lineofaction.com, where you have several options to pick what kind of model you want to use and the session, and a bunch of other options. If you're going to be animating characters, you need to know how the human body works and moves. You'll need to be able to observe how they function, how they balance their weight, and how joints operate, and you'll need to be able to translate that observation into your animation. And that's why gesture drawing is important, even if you're going to be 3D animating. I also recommend you learn about color theory, line and form, perspective, and shape language, as these are the foundations to good art and animation. If you're wanting to be a 2D animator, then this would all hopefully go without saying, but even if you want to be a 3D animator, you need to understand these theories to create the most appealing and convincing staging, poses, be able to utilize things like color to support your scenes and the subtext behind them, shape language to support your key poses and silhouettes and layout, and really understand how our characters and creations actually work in 3D and 2D space. The concepts you'll learn here will help you in training your eye and your mind in creating really good shots and telling a good story in the clearest way possible, and help your animations look better and more professional and appealing. Appeal is really important in animation. Now, there are some books that will help you immensely in your journey to becoming a good animator, and while these are not free, they're a hell of a lot cheaper than paying for a course. You can keep them forever, and they will always be useful to you. A really great book that is basically our Bible is The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams. I've spoken about it quite a few times before. I've had this book for about 14 years now, and I still refer back to it. It seriously is so chock-a-block full of really valuable information that you'll always need to know as an animator. You'll learn about really important stuff like frame rates, animating on 1s and 2s, extremes, in-betweens and breakdowns, and tons of other animation concepts. This book covers stuff about using X sheets, spacing, walks and runs and jumps, dialogue and acting, animal animation, body language, directing. That's just the surface. You won't find another book that'll teach you as much as this one will. And I highly suggest you start at the beginning and work your way through. Read everything. Another really great book, which I also have myself, is The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, who are two OG Disney animators, where you can learn about the 12 principles of animation. This is where they first debuted in this book. Things like appeal and dynamics, character development, acting, and tons of other really interesting and pertinent stuff to becoming a good animator. Another really informative book is Animated Storytelling: Simple Steps for Creating Animation and Motion Graphics by Liz Blazer. This works really well in combination with the Animator's Survival Kit and The Illusion of Life, because while those books cover the nitty-gritty of the animations and their mechanics, this book focuses on story structures, communicating your ideas, and utilizing design in a way that supports your animations, which is great for increasing the appeal and clarity of your work and supporting your filmmaking. I'll link to where you can find these books on Amazon in the description of this video. Once you understand these concepts and practices which form the foundation of animation, you need to learn about the animation fundamentals. No, you can't just jump into animating a really sick fight scene. What were you thinking? Start with the core principles.
The 12 principles of animation.
There are tons of resources out there on the 12 principles of animation, but one of the best in my opinion is the video series right here on good old YouTube by Alan Baker Tutorials, and I'll link to that series down below. Study this like your life depends on it, because if you want to be a good animator, it does. So you're going to want to become very familiar with these 12 basic principles, and you're not just going to watch videos and read articles about them, you're going to practice them. A lot. And not with the character with limbs and all these extraneous bits and bobs to distract you. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. You're going to learn about these principles with the most simple objects. A ball and a brick. Bally MacBolson and Brick Brickanopolis. They will be more than enough to practice squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action and pose to pose, follow through and overlapping action, slow in and slow out, arcs, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and appeal. You might be at a loss on how to portray follow through and overlapping action or secondary action with just a brick and a ball, for instance, but you can make your brick a little more floppy to illustrate follow through, for example, or add a tail to your ball. Use creative license, that's a huge part of being an animator, but start with just one concept, like with squash and stretch, and animate a ball bouncing up and down, squashing and stretching. Then animate a heavier ball made out of a different material, bouncing up and down. The way it squashes and stretches will be different depending on the weight and mass and material of the ball. And keep on like that through all the principles, animating them in as many different ways with just a ball and a brick as you can possibly think of. There are tons of tutorials out there, for example, on how to animate a ball bouncing. So once you've got squash and stretch down, you can animate it bouncing across the screen to practice arcs. You can animate it getting pushed off the edge of a hill to practice slow in and slow out. There are so many different ways to use your ball to practice these 12 principles. And once you've got the ball down, you can start using our old friend Brick Brickanopolis to also practice these principles. Make him different materials. Make him a really solid, rigid, heavy brick in one thing and make him really bouncy and bendy in another. It's the shape that you're using to convey these principles, and practice them until you're really, really familiar with them. I made a video on animation exercises for beginners, so if you do want to check that out, I'll link to it in the corner of the screen and in the description of this video. For more ideas on exercises for beginners, check out these 51 great animation exercises from Animator Island and this list of exercises from animatorartistlife.com. So practice these beginner exercises as much as you possibly can, first going through them one by one and focusing on each one separately, and then once you are comfortable and confident with them, start combining them into an animation. Practice using arcs and squash and stretch and follow through and all the different principles in one animation as much as you possibly can. Give your animation some personality and have fun with it. There are also some core principles to animation that go hand in hand with the 12 principles but are not always expressly spoken about, which I want to highlight for you guys. There's personality, which is very important. You need to remember that your characters are supposed to come across convincingly as whole, fully realized people with rich emotions and lives, not flat puppets being manipulated on the screen. And their unique personalities need to be apparent. This is what's going to make your audience feel invested in your characters and your stories. Another really important aspect is spacing, which ties in with the principle of timing. Spacing is just as important as timing and needs to be considered at all times. It also ties in with the principle of slow in and slow out. So while you're learning about timing, a lot of sources might mention spacing, but if they don't, please keep that in mind and make sure that you're focusing on that. I do have a video on timing and spacing, which you can find right here where it'll pop up in the corner of the screen or in a link in the description. You also need to focus on weight, mass, and gravity and how to convey that effectively in your animations. Without knowledge of these concepts, your work will look very floaty, amateurish, and ungrounded in reality. Everything in animation has some sort of weight and mass, and gravity affects everything, so this is really important for believable animation. Do a lot of exercises where weight and mass is at the forefront. Animate objects of different weights and masses falling down, being thrown, compare them to each other, and see how differently you can animate them to accurately convey the weight that they have. For instance, you could animate a tennis ball and a bowling ball both falling down from the same height, or a leaf and a feather and a sack of rocks. Compare their weights and see how you can convey the difference in their weights and masses. Another important concept that doesn't always get mentioned when you're trying to watch videos and learn about animation is shot clarity. I think because it falls under directing more than strictly animation, but it's still really, really important to have a good animation shot. This goes along with staging, having clear silhouettes for your characters and making sure there's readability in your scene so that nothing is muddy. This is really important for your viewers to actually pick up on what's going on in your scene. And you can watch videos or read articles about directing, and the books I mentioned before also touch on this in some areas. And I've also done a video on how to improve clarity in your shots, so you can check that out as well. Now you might be asking yourself, how am I supposed to learn and practice this shit if I can't afford the very expensive software that animators use? I'm not about that flipbook life. Well, if you want to learn 2D animation, you can use free software like OpenToons, and for 3D, just use Blender. I use both of these apps myself and they are really great. I'll put links to them in the description of the video. I do suggest starting out in 2D animation just to wrap your head around the concepts, because it can be a little overwhelming trying to jump straight into 3D. And doing it in 2D also gives you a really good grasp and practice in conceptualizing the 3D and 2D space that your characters are moving in, without having the 3D app to do that for you. So once you've got the core principles down and you're comfortable animating your balls and your bricks and your other inanimate objects, then you can start on your character animation, but don't dive into the greater body mechanics just yet. You're still trying to keep it simple. So you're going to start, for instance, with just animating a very simple head turn. Just isolate the head and the neck. Don't worry about what the rest of the body is doing. And remember to incorporate your 12 principles now on whatever you're animating on your character. Keep in mind arcs. When you turn your head, it doesn't just go straight, it's going to arc down because of the concept of arcs. You're going to have your slow in and your slow out. You might have some squash and stretch. If it's a really fast head turn, you can really exaggerate that squash and stretch. And there again is another principle, which is exaggeration. Do a head turn in as many different ways as you possibly can imagine. Do a fast one, do a slow one, do a happy one, do a sad one, do a surprised one. Try and convey as much personality and emotions in these very simple movements as you possibly can, because that's what animation really is all about. Then you can move on to doing a character blinking. You might think a blink is very simple and straightforward, but there are some things you still need to consider there. I've done a video on blinking if you want to check that out, so practice really simple things like that. Then you can move on to animating an arm just lifting and pressing a light switch. Again, try and convey as much personality and emotion in these actions as you possibly can. Outfit change! Just kidding, I actually had to stop filming that video midway through. Something came up and now it is a new day, new outfit. But anyway, to carry on from where we left off, you are still keeping things simple at this point. You're not going to go into the greater body mechanics yet. You're still getting used to the way each limb works and how the different parts function isolated from everything else before you go and focus on how the rest of the body works all together. Now, when you animate, there is a process that you need to follow. You don't just start all willy-nilly and hope for the best. The best is not going to happen that way. You don't just start animating without any forethought or structure or planning. This process is also just a good way to break it down into bite-sized chunks so that you have a way to approach it without getting too overwhelmed by everything that you have to consider when you're animating something. So this is a very high-level process that I'm going to talk about now. It's up to you to go and take each part that I mentioned and do further research on it so that you fully understand each thing that I'm talking about. The first step in this process is to roughly plan out your animation with something that we call thumbnailing. So this is where you go and you rough out your poses and your actions, just quickly getting your thoughts down on the paper to see what works and what doesn't, without putting too much thought into each pose. Then you'll move on to storyboarding, where you refine what you've thumbnailed, plan out your animation in sequential pictures in more detail, plan out your timing for your sequences and shots, and break down the key poses a bit more than the thumbnails. If you want to learn more about storyboarding, you can check out the video that I'm linking to in the corner of the screen. It'll be in the description too, about how to storyboard for animation. There's also this free short 2-hour course from ToonBoom, which will walk you through the animation pipeline, an intro to storyboarding, and the language of storyboards. And this very cool free course from storyboard artist, teacher, and animation director Sergio Paez. This course is apparently free only for a limited time. I'm not sure how limited that time is, but check it out. Once you've plotted out your animation and you have a storyboard, you'd usually go into the animatic stage, which is taking your storyboard and laying it out on a timeline so it plays out with the timing and key poses you need for each shot, which you can then use as timing and pose reference when animating. Then you need to shoot reference video. This is very important. Even the most seasoned professional animators use reference. Just set up your camera, try to match the angle that you'll be using in your animation, and record yourself doing the action that you want to animate. It can also be useful to use other angles, like from the side or from a 3/4 pose, just to see how your body's moving in 3D space so that you can fully understand the action and how you need to animate it happening. Now you can start with the animation, but hold your horses because we're still taking baby steps here. You first need to plot out your key poses. You don't just jump right in and start animating straight away. After you've got your key poses down, then you'll start doing the blocking, which is adding in the breakdowns between the key poses. The animation is still very rigid and simple at this point, and you'll be using stepped tangents. You're not using splines or smooth curves and smooth movements. There's a really good video from animator and YouTuber So Wade Neistat called Animation Blocking plus Finding Key Poses with Reference, which explains to you really nicely, as well as an article I'll link to in my description from Animation Mentor called 5 Key Steps for Effective Blocking. But obviously try and do a little more research yourself on each of these stages so that you can fully grasp them. After the blocking, when you're happy with your key poses and your timing, that's when you'll do splining if you're working with a rigged character, either in 3D or in 2D. Splining is when you convert the interpolation of the stepped keys in your blocking phase to smooth curves. Please make sure you look into the curve or graph editor and understand how to adjust your curves to improve your spacing and work on your slow in and out. The graph editor or curve editor, depending on your software, is extremely necessary and you need to understand how to use it. You'll need to research that for whatever your software is. If you're working in 2D frame by frame, this is the place where you'll be further refining your in-betweens. Then you'll start polishing your animation and incorporating all the little things like your offset and your follow-through and your secondary animation, incorporating the 12 principles that you should know really well by now. While you're working on an animation shot, I do recommend focusing on the body movements and your timing first before you go into facial animation. You can use key poses for your facials, but don't go in and refine it until you've got your actions and your timing done really well, because your facial animation depends on what your body is doing. So if you need to make changes to the body or the timing, your facial is still going to change. So leave that until the end. I recommend using social media to get feedback on your work, because obviously if you're watching this video, you don't have the benefit of a lecturer or a mentor to give you guidance and constructive criticism. There are Discord channels out there that you can use, animation subreddits, Facebook groups, anything like that where you can post your work and ask for feedback. And there are often professionals on there who are more than happy to give you some guidance. So once you're happy with the 12 principles and you've done all these beginner exercises and you start to get comfortable with animating the body and its various parts, then you can move on to learning about body mechanics. This is character animation in terms of the way the body works, the way the limbs and muscles and parts of the body work together to make a character move in a believable way. Like how when you wave at somebody, it's not just your isolated hand moving back and forth. There's a lot going on in the whole rest of the body. Your weight will subtly shift, your shoulders will tilt as your elbow and your shoulder work together to bring your hand up. And even as I'm waving now, you can see there's slight movement in my body, in my head, in everything. Everything is connected in some way, and that is what body mechanics is. There are a lot of videos and articles out there on body mechanics. A good one is The Basics of Body Mechanics from Majors Institute, and this video from Alessandro Comparota on a classic mistake new animators make with their body mechanics will also be helpful. And this video from Animation Career Pro on body mechanics, torque, and power. But apart from these, do as much research and exercises as you can on how to accurately portray body mechanics and how the body works. Another great way to practice this is to actually use live action footage, either recording yourself or taking something from a movie, and try to replicate that in an animation as closely as possible. Pay attention to every little detail that you possibly can in the entire body. If you're going to be animating with rigs, either 2D or 3D, you are also going to know about inverse kinematics and forward kinematics, otherwise referred to as IK and FK. I've done a video on IK and FK, so check that out when you come to the body mechanics stage. The link will be in the description. You're going to start with the basics, so you've got walk cycles, run cycles, characters jumping or skipping, a character picking something up really heavy or getting up from a chair. And you can find suggestions for these exercises on those websites that I already mentioned before, where you can get those animation exercises. You're also going to want to start to focus on things that make your shots stronger, like staging and composition, and I have done videos on these before, which I'll also link to in the description. Really focus on sequence of movement, action and reaction, as well as incorporating all the stuff you would have learned before that I already mentioned. The 12 principles, as well as weight, mass, gravity, spacing, and shot clarity, as well as your character's line of action. That's an important one. After you're feeling really comfortable with body mechanics and you feel like you truly understand how the body works all together as a system, then you can move on to acting, because really that's what animation's all about. You're acting through your character and it needs to be believable. I don't suggest trying to learn body mechanics and acting at the same time, because with animation you really need to focus on one thing at a time so that you can fully grasp and understand it to bring it out in your work. Otherwise, you're just going to get really overwhelmed, and it's going to be a situation of jack of all trades but master of none, because you've sort of touched on all of them but didn't really give each of them the attention that they deserved to really understand them. So when you get to learning about acting, you need to focus on body language, which is different to body mechanics, because while mechanics are the ways that various different parts of the body work together to execute actions, body language is how we convey certain emotions and information through poses and movements, utilizing things like subtext. And this is where the principle of secondary animation, which you should be well aware of when you get to this point, also really shines, because it helps to support the subtext and the acting. Some great tutorials on acting for animation are Acting Tips for Animators from Anim School and Animation Lessons from a DreamWorks Animator from Sir Wade Neistat, as well as Acting for Animators, Become Your Character with Sarah Arduini from Gnomon Workshop, and this article from Animation Mentor. You'll want to work on exercises that focus on pantomime, which is conveying emotions and information without speaking. This is vital to animation and supporting the story. Along with the art of pantomime, you're going to want to focus on facial animation and lip syncing, and along with lip syncing goes phonemes. These are specific shapes our mouths make and what the most common ones are for each sound mouths make when speaking. The body language and pantomime that you learn will go towards supporting any acting that you have. When you start learning acting and practicing it, don't get ahead of yourself and go straight into doing scenes with more than one character in it. Focus on one character at first until you feel truly confident to move on to more complex shots where more than one character will be interacting, and where you'll have to learn how to balance the shot between the characters and hit all the beats while maintaining clarity. This is where my video on planning your animation shots will come in handy, because I address things like clarity, context, and cohesiveness in your shots, acting and emotional beats, and camera work. Once you've gone through all these aspects of animation and practiced the various techniques and disciplines and feel like you have a really good grasp of it, you will be well on your way to becoming a good animator. Don't forget to go and download that curriculum document over on my Patreon. It's free, it's open for anybody to download, and it's got all the stuff that I've talked about here in this video, so you can remember to go and research all that stuff and not forget anything that's going to be crucial to your animation progress. I have a playlist called Animation Workflow that I do recommend you go through as you're learning, as it does address a lot of what I've spoken about here in this video. You'll obviously need to flesh out your learning with other resources as well, so you have a well-rounded education that could be as good as a paid-for animation course. You should also check out my playlist of animation and industry tips, which will give you more guidance and insight on the industry itself, as well as how to improve your animations with common mistakes animators make and how to fix them, how to improve clarity in your animations, when to animate with pose-to-pose or straight-ahead action, and a bunch of other stuff that you'll find useful on your animation education journey. I hope this was helpful, and please feel free to comment below on any other animation education resources that you think would be helpful for other people watching this video. Thank you to my patrons as always. I really appreciate the support, and it's a big motivator in keeping this channel going. Subscribe if you want to keep up to date with my other videos, give this video a like to help with the algorithm, and thanks for watching. Bye!